Alright, so there's a ton of stuff that we got to get into here, so we're just going to have to laser focus. So naturally, we're going to kick it off with Morgan, and we'll go into a couple of things regarding her background. When it comes to the pan history version of Morgan, the OG Morgan, we know that she was a person that was always jealous of Artoria due to her position in the myth. In the original myth, Artoria from birth was prophesied to be a leader, to be somebody to reign over Camelot, to be the person that is going to be the center of attention and everybody is going to look towards for answers. And because of this, their father, Uther, gave Artoria a lot of attention in order to make sure that the prophecy goes smoothly. Because of this, Morgan has always had this unrequited love, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but it makes a lot of sense what she did story-wise using Mordred when you consider how she was treated from her perspective. And we can go into that now. Morgan is the sole reason why a lot of people hated Artoria from the jump. She's the one that had Mordred created. She's the one that sent her out to destroy Camelot because she was jealous of Artoria. Da Vinci says it herself. She is indirectly responsible for the death of Artoria and the downfall of Camelot. Now, there's a lot of other working parts here. I'm not trying to throw that out the picture, but this is the main one that people tend to forget. Now that I think about it, I really liken her position to the one that Zokin had in Stay Night, because from the very beginning, she comes in, she weaves all this destruction, and then she just goes into the shadows. She's nowhere to be found. And that's what I mean by her situation with Mordred. You ever seen somebody try to live through their kids? Oh, I wanted you to be a lawyer or a doctor. Not just because they wanted to see you do well, but it's because they couldn't do it. So now they're trying to live vicariously through you. It's the same thing with Mordred. She's trying to live vicariously through her due to the unrequited love that she had with her father Uther. All of that was just going in the same cycle, as it usually does. Now, as people, and people are tribal, they want somebody to blame. But Morgan is nowhere to be found. But guess who is? Artoria. So a lot of the unwarranted hate that Artoria got, all of those things can be attributed to Morgan. Without her, Mordred doesn't exist. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that her existence is intertwined with the Lady of the Lake. Now, I'm not saying she is the Lady of the Lake, but in myth, they are two figures based on the same person. They're counterparts, Morgan being the evil one and the Lady of the Lake, or Vivian or Nimue, she's the good side. And we know that the Lady of the Lake is the one that trapped Merlin in the Tower of Avalon. Why? Because he was out here rizzing up everybody else. The thing is, Merlin is the one that taught Vivian magic, and Morgan is her counterpart. So for the people wondering, oh, how could Morgan be touted as one of the best mages in Fate? Look who she learned from. And this is on top of her already being a fairy herself. And before anybody confuses the two, yes, that goes for Fate as well. It bleeds into the series, just like everybody else, unless they say otherwise. And then on the other side, you got the Lady of the Lake. She's the mother of Lancelot, and she's the one that took care of him. And she's the one that gave Artoria her Excalibur after she lost Caliburn. Now, going back to Morgan's design, and this is actually hilarious. When you look at her design, and she looks incredible, by the way. Since her and Artoria are actually sisters, she is a saberface. They're gonna look the same. She's supposed to be a wicked counterpart, and you can see Takeuchi trying to go for that in her design. But here's what happened. Takeuchi brought this design to Nasu when he was making LB6, and he was like, oh no, I just can't do it. She's way too beautiful for me to make her the evil person that she once was in pan-human history. So this is where the narrative of what she does in Lostbelt 6 starts to come from. It's literally just Nasu looking at Takeuchi's design and wanting to make her more favorable to match up. And that's why I like what Nasu did, because it still in part remains true to her original lore, but it adds a lot of depth to it, because instead of her just being clearly evil, it's more humane, because, you know, when it comes to things like subjugation, the alignment is in the eye of the beholder. She may be evil to somebody, she may be evil to the fairies, but to her, she's just keeping things together. But just like anybody going through those motions, that doesn't mean that the world has to accept it. So when it comes to the Lostbelt version, again, she is a different existence. In the Lostbelt, as you can already tell, the story has flipped from the way that it was in pan-human history. Instead of Artoria being the ruler, now she's the ruler, because she always felt like she could do a better job, and Nasu is kind of giving us a look into that. And honestly, according to her situation, she did, but that's only because she was the one that ruined Artoria's reign. So with nobody to ruin her reign, and with her being a fairy being able to live that long, she was able to have a longer rule. That's very true. In the Lostbelt of Avalon, Morgan has ruled for 2,000 years. She's established her own fairy knights, and Burl, of course, is the one that summoned her. Although we get her as a berserker, he's the one that summoned her as a ruler. And she does just that. She rules over Britain from that side as the Lostbelt king. And not only that, but he also serves as her husband. He's the one helping her orchestrate a lot of these things from the background. And part of the reason why she ruled for so long is because she's been ruling with an iron fist. She had to become a tyrant. Morgan defeated 6 clans of fairies in order for her to maintain control. Most of the people are scared of her, and if you try to go against her, she will eviscerate you on the spot, because who's gonna stop her with that amount of power? So in the Lostbelt, exactly like it was in myth, there's a person that is prophesied to deal with this and come and save the kingdom, and naturally that is Artoria. That's where Castoria comes in. They even liken her role to pulling the sword of selection by giving her the staff of selection, because she's in her caster form. This time, instead of defending Britain by being over Camelot, she's going to defend Britain by opposing Morgan's position. But in the story, she has to find a way to reach up to there. She has to get to that level. Now you're probably wondering, okay, why is Morgan going against her own people? If she's a fairy herself, what would be the need for her to be a tyrant? Shouldn't they all be on the same terms? Prior to this Lostbelt, contrary to their original lore, in Fate, Morgan was created by the planet as Vivian. In the Lostbelt, their identities have been somewhat merged together, and she was sent as a mechanism of the planet. You know, she is a fairy, they're an extension of the planet itself. It sent her to convince the other fairies that they need to help forge the holy sword, Excalibur. The thing about that is they were constantly at war with each other. Morgan tried to break them up, but nothing she said could ever get them to remain at peace. So Morgan decided, okay, it's looking like I gotta do it by force. And that's where the tyranny comes in. She used the power of her black magic, slapped the 6 clans that I mentioned, and took half of them under her wing. In addition to this, she only gives humans a certain amount of authority. There's only a certain amount of humans that can be born per year, because she doesn't even want them to flirt with the idea of them possibly stopping her reign. So if a baby gets born and it's not supposed to, it's getting whacked. It's terrible. Oberon tells us that her methods are so drastic that she puts command spells on the fairies living under her as a tax, one that drains them for magical energy. And if they can't withstand it, she just obliterates them. See ya. Sucks to suck. He also tells us that one of her real goals is to turn the entire planet into fairyland. That, of course, meaning turning Earth itself into Avalon. And that's one thing that makes this Lostbelt so different from all the others: the severity. And this is something that Tsiah explained to us, because we weren't gonna go to Avalon. We were gonna skip over this Lostbelt because they lost their fantasy tree. What happened to it? Turns out that Morgan went behind Burl's back, absorbed it into her as energy, and used it as the fuel to take down the tree that was in Olympus. But in the picture it shows us in the Lostbelt, all you see as the remains is the trunk. That's the only thing that's left off in the distance. It's like, oh, okay, well, since their fantasy tree is gone, that Lostbelt will just fizzle out. We can just go to Lostbelt 7. No. The weight of this Lostbelt, Avalon, is so severe on the planet itself that just leaving it alone will cause Earth to cave in on itself. So if the Lostbelt goes, we go. And then we can't fix the bleaching. and we only have 24 hours real time to do this. Though in the Lostbelt, time is moving differently, so we got a lot more breathing room. And that's because where it takes place. You know, it takes place in the inner sea of the planet, or as we know it, the reverse side of the world. So our plan going into the Lostbelt is not to just fix it like normal. There's nothing to be fixed. It's already ruined. It's a dead end. Unlike all the other Lostbelts where humanity had the possibility of going towards extinction, we are currently an endangered species in that Lostbelt. There's nothing else that exists in Avalon but Avalon. All the other Lostbelts, you can see the nations outside of them, that doesn't exist. It's just Britain. So instead of just going to fix it, we're going to negotiate with Morgan, and we're gonna try to at least get our hands on Rongominiad because we need a divine construct. And seeing that it was literally strong enough to cross between two different Lostbelts when she shot us all the way from Avalon to Olympus, it's at least worth giving it the attempt. We really need that on our side. As of the beginning of the Lostbelt, we know that she has 30 ambassadors and 100 officers on demand ready to go. Of course, there is more to her story, and we will be unpacking this here on the channel as we get through it.